Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see from the title, today I am doing my January wrap-up, and this time I think I'm going to do things a little bit differently from last month. I'm going to be doing two separate videos dedicated to wrapping up January because I read 24 books this past month, which is insane. I have never read that many books in a single month. And because of that, I didn't want to just try to do one video talking about 24 books because one, that video would be like an hour long, and two, I would feel the need to kind of speed through each book and not give you a detailed enough review of each one. So today I'm going to be talking about the first 12 books that I read in January. And I actually had a really great start to 2019 because my first book of the year was Heretics Anonymous by KATHERINE. So this book follows our main character, Michael, who is an atheist, and he is sent to a Catholic high school. And essentially he joins Heretics Anonymous, which is a group led by his friends that he's made, and essentially it's kind of a place where they can all complain about the school and about Catholicism in general. And this book is so funny. I was actually laughing out loud, which like never happens when I read. Michael's observations of the Catholic faith were just hilarious and so on point. And KATHERINE's writing is just so easy to read. I probably could have read this in one sitting if I allowed myself to, because it's only about 300 pages. And yeah, I think anybody would enjoy this book, but especially if you were raised Catholic or you are practicing Catholic now, I think you're going to get the jokes even more than someone who's not religious. I think as long as you don't take your religion too seriously, I think you would really enjoy the jokes in this book. This book is also so much more than the jokes. I thought it was just a really cute story, and I enjoyed all of the characters and their friendship. And yeah, I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. Alright, and the next book that I tried to read in January was Sensuous by Hawthorne. This was a NetGalley arc, and this is actually a part of a series. I read the first book that was titled Sinful back in December, and I did include that in my December wrap-up. So if you're interested to see my thoughts on the first book in this series, you can check out that video. I'll link it down below. But this book was a big, fat yikes. Just to kind of give you a recap of what this series is about, it's essentially about a love triangle, but there is also threesome vibes kind of thrown in. And for the most part, I was liking this one more than Sinful, which is the first book in the series. So the three main characters in this are named Xander, Sin, and then Belle is the girl that they are both fighting for, but at the same time, like, they're okay with having a threesome with her. It's all very confusing and weird. There's this sex scene between Belle and Sin, and there are definitely consent issues. Basically, Sin tries to get Belle to do something she doesn't want to do, and she explicitly tells him to stop. And his response is, well, it's too late for that, and it's going to feel good in a minute, so just let me keep going. That's sexual assault, so yeah, I stopped reading right after that scene, and all I can say is yikes. The next book I read in January was Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Dark Artifices trilogy, which is a part of the Shadowhunter Chronicles universe. And I did talk about Lady Midnight in my December wrap-up, so if you want to hear my thoughts about that book specifically, again, I will link that video down below. This book was such a journey. This was straight up a roller coaster ride. I'm loving the characters even more in this series, especially Ty and Julian Blackthorne. They are just the best, and they have stolen my heart. And I'm still just marveling at how Cassie just gets better and better with her writing and her plots and her characters. They're all just so multifaceted, and it's just so interesting reading about all of them. And the ending of this one was crazy. This is the only Shadowhunter book that I can think of where the ending was just so chaotic and such a crazy cliffhanger. Usually her books kind of wrap up in a neat little bow, but still lead you to want to read the next book, but this one ended on some crazy cliffhanger, and unfortunately I was kind of spoiled for it, but it still devastated me, so there you go. Loved this one, gave it 4.5 stars. The next book I read in January is Willful Depravity by Ingrid Hahn. This is another NetGalley arc, and overall this was a really solid historical romance. The reason why I requested this one is that the main character, whose name is Patience, is actually plus-sized, and I was very curious to see how an author would handle a plus-sized character in the setting of the 1800s. I thought it was done really well. I really enjoyed the relationship between Patience, who is the main character, and Giles, who is her love interest. Actually kind of cool because Giles is bisexual, and that's also something I haven't seen in a historical romance. I thought that the drama and the romance slash smut was all very well balanced, and it still allowed the romance to take the spotlight, which is something that I really appreciate in romance novels. And I really appreciated that Patience was never fetishized throughout this story. So yeah, very solid romance. Gave this one 3 stars. The next book I want to talk about is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This one I actually listened to on audio, and I really enjoyed that format. Basically, this is a very interesting story about this town called Beartown. Everybody in this town is obsessed with hockey. We follow quite a few POVs of different teenagers and adults that live in this town. And there's an event that occurs about 40% of the way through this book that really changes the tone completely and the trajectory of the novel. While it came out of nowhere, I thought it was done really, really well. And I'm not going to tell you what specific event it is because I just think it's a spoiler because it happens almost halfway through the novel. So if I were you, I would avoid reviews of this novel. If you think this is something you would enjoy, I would just go ahead and pick it up, because I've watched a few reviews that claim to be non-spoiler and they reveal what this event is, and I think that if you know what the event is going into it, I just don't think you're gonna have the same experience that I did. And while I did get kind of confused throughout because there are so many POVs and so many characters to follow, I did overall really enjoy it, and I thought the ending was really well done, so I gave this one 4 stars. The next book I want to talk about is The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. This is actually a bind-up of prequel novellas to the Throne of Glass series, and I'm actually participating in a buddy read with some friends that I made on book Twitter. I've decided to read 1 book of this series per month, so January was The Assassin's Blade, and in February we will read Throne of Glass, and so on. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. I did give it 3.5 stars. I think it gives really good insight into who Celaena Sardothien is, who is our main character in this series. It was really cool to just see why she is the way she is and what makes her tick. I also really enjoyed the other characters in this, such as Sam, who is her love interest. So there are 5 novellas in this bind-up, and I felt that some were better than others. A couple of them were paced kind of slow, and a couple of them I felt were just kind of repetitive with the kind of events that were going on. Overall, I really did have an enjoyable reading experience, so I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars, and I'm super pumped to actually get into the Throne of Glass series this month. Next book I want to talk about is Some Girls Bind by Rory James. This is yet another NetGalley arc. Really cool because it's a YA novel written in verse, which is something that I have discovered that I really, really enjoy. In this book, we follow Jamie, who actually discovers that they are genderqueer. Throughout this novel, we follow Jamie's journey into discovering who they are and coming out to their friends and their parents. Overall, this was really enjoyable. I do think that there could have been more substance to it. When something is written in verse, obviously there are going to be less words than in any normal novel. Usually that makes it more impactful for me personally, but I just felt that this novel was a little too sparse. I think we could have spent more time with Jamie discovering who they are and discovering that they are genderqueer. But I did overall really enjoy it, and I think this kind of novel is really great for teens who are discovering who they are. So I did give this one 3.5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is All the Rage by Courtney Summers. Before I go into this, huge trigger warning for sexual assault and extreme bullying. So Courtney Summers is the same author as Sadie, which I read last fall and I really, really loved, especially the audiobook. And that is also a book that a ton of people have been talking about on BookTube. So I discovered that I wanted to read more of her works. Essentially how I came across this book was reading reviews for some other YA novels that deal with the topic of rape, and one reviewer in particular mentioned this specific book as a really great book, kind of exploring obviously the rage, kind of the aftermath of being sexually assaulted. Just thought that it was overall a really well-written novel about this heavy topic. So, and given that it's by Courtney Summers, I knew it was going to be something that I would love, so I actually picked this up from Book Outlet for like $2 or $3. Overall, this was a really, really good novel. It's very dark and very heavy. I remember my reading experience was just so intense. I remember every time I would put this down, I would literally have to take a big breath of relief because this book is just so heavy, and you're really getting into the mind of the main character, whose name is Romy. And essentially what's happened is that a year before the book starts, she was sexually assaulted by the sheriff's son, and no one really believed her except for her own parents. So she is extremely bullied. It's really, really awful what the kids at her high school say and do to her. But this book just reminded me of how powerful words are, and that I really felt immersed in Romy's mind. I completely empathized with all of her choices and all of her decisions, and I felt myself feeling like I was Romy. It doesn't really happen all that often when I'm reading a novel. Summers just like knows how to write YA novels that are really dark but really powerful, and I overall just highly recommend this one. If you really enjoyed Sadie, I think you will really enjoy this one too, so I gave this one a 4 stars. And this book, like Sadie, does have an open-ended ending, but again, it's just so well done in my opinion, and I think it perfectly fits the overall arc of the story. Next book I want to talk about is actually a novella, and that is Son of the Dawn by Cassandra, Clare, and Sarah Rees Brennan. This is the first novella in the Ghosts of the Shadow Market bind-up. Is coming out later this year. But these novellas were published individually on ebook, so I got all of them on my Kindle. And I overall thought this was just such a great start to this novella series. I actually didn't really have high hopes going into this after reading Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, which is another bind-up of novellas. I covered that one in my December wrap-up as well, so if you're curious to know my specific thoughts about that one, again, that video will be linked down below. Overall, I just felt that that bind-up just felt very fan-fiction-y and not near the quality of her full novels. But I have to say, these novellas have really blown me away for the most part. So just to kind of explain what this novella series is all about, we are following Brother Zachariah, who is a prominent character in all of the Shadowhunter Chronicles series, so the Infernal Devices, the Mortal Instruments, and the Dark Artifices, and we're essentially following him in different points of his life. So in this novella, we are actually in the year 2000. This is actually covering when Jace, who is one of the main characters in the Mortal Instruments series, actually moves to New York to live with the Lightwoods. And I didn't go into this novella specifically with high hopes because I wasn't really interested in seeing the Lightwoods and Jace as children, honestly. It's actually really enjoyable to see these characters as children, and with pretty much all of these novellas, there's 2 plots going on at the same time, and it was really great to see Brother Zachariah working with Raphael and Lily and Robert Lightwood, and I'm absolutely obsessed with Lily and her different nicknames for Brother Zachariah. But yeah, really solid novella. I gave this one 4 stars. So the next book I want to talk about is The One by John Mars. This is another one that I actually listened to on audiobook, and I actually really enjoyed it because they had different narrators for the different POVs. And the main plot of this novel is that there is something called Match Your DNA, which is something kind of like Match.com and like eHarmony, where you are getting matched with your soulmate, but there's actually kind of a science fiction twist to it because this company actually uses your DNA to perfectly match you with your soulmate. And I was a little disappointed in this simply because I was kind of misled by the synopsis. I thought that this was going to be more of a dystopian novel in that people would be forced to be with their match, no matter if they were already married or already had a boyfriend or girlfriend or were in some kind of situation where they weren't actually single. But really, this follows more of like a thriller novel in that there's basically 5 different POVs, and these 5 different characters do the Match Your DNA test for different reasons. Some of them already have significant others, but basically through the course of this novel, all of these 5 different characters end up being with their DNA match for different reasons and for different situations. Overall, this was really enjoyable. There's lots of plot twists in this one. It's definitely pretty fast moving in my opinion. And yeah, I highly recommend this one, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I want to talk about is #FashionVictim by Amina Akhtar. This is actually a book of the month pick for the month of September of 2018. And this book follows this character, Anya, who essentially is working in the fashion industry at a specific magazine. And she essentially becomes obsessed with one of her co-workers and wants to become her best friend and will do literally whatever it takes to make that happen. So there are definitely the Devil Wears Prada vibes as well as Heather's vibes. Anya, Cassandra, who is our main character, is one fucked up person. Some of the things that she does in this novel are absolutely insane, but I was so entertained throughout this entire novel. And yeah, this is kind of one of those guilty pleasure reads. I think I gave this one 3.5 stars because yeah, it may not be the most well-written or the most captivating story or the most high art, but it was just so enjoyable. It was only 250 pages or so. It was just a really great, fun read. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is Every Heart a Doorway by SEANAN Mcguire. So the essential plot of this book and this series, it's a series of 4 novels, is that this covers the aftermath of different children who go into some type of fantastical land and they end up back in the real world. And so there is this special school for these wayward children to kind of deal with that aftermath. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. It definitely went in directions that I wasn't expecting. And I know that a lot of people have complained about how short these novels are. They're only about 150 pages or so, but I just felt that the way SEANAN wrote them was just so well done, and it really didn't feel like it lacked anything in my opinion. It really did feel like a complete story. And I thought that the characters were very well developed. I really enjoyed the plot, and I'm overall just really looking forward to the other books in this series. And I gave this one 4 stars. And that is it for part 1 of my January wrap-up. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in part 2. I hope you would consider subscribing, and don't forget to press the bell notification button below so you will be notified every time I upload. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye!